One thing I was thinking about the other day, and I read an article somewhere, and it just kind of triggered a thought, and it was about the adoption rate of FUE in the industry. And it was slow to catch on.
Slow. It was pathetic.
It was pathetic.
Yeah.
It was a snail's pace. But it was for different reasons, I think, than follicular unit transplantation, the use of microscopic dissection. I think it was for different reasons. And I was actually started, I've been writing an article on this that I'm going to put on my website. And it has to do with the history and my thoughts on why it's been slow. And tell me what you think. So, you look
I'll
back
tell
in
you,
history,
because I know why it was slow, but go ahead.
There's this guy you might have heard of, Ray Woods.
Yeah.
And, the father of modern FUE, right? And he started doing this procedure.
Before you finish, I think it's important that people understand this, that the sad part of this is that Ray Woods is now nothing but a footnote in the history of FUE, when he truly is the father of FUE, modern-day FUE, and frankly, modern-day surgical hair restoration. But he kind of like destroyed his ability to get that credit. And I'll let you finish your story.
Well, and yeah, because he became his own worst enemy in the fact that he had the right idea of, coming up with a less invasive or a less invasive technique.
Less invasive.
And kudos to him for that. I mean, he's done the world of surgical hair restoration a big one.
Oh my God! What he was able to produce, especially back in the late '80s and early '90s, was unbelievable.
And that's the thing. This is back in the late '80s that he started this,
Yeah.
and where he went wrong with his approach was instead of just giving this information away, coming up with a model where he would train doctors for free in exchange for a piece of the action, as it were. He was asking for a large training fee up front, and I think that was the hurdle to widespread adoption early on.
Well, I think there were a couple of hurdles, and that's a major hurdle. But since you are writing an article, I'll give you my opinion. I think another major hurdle was the way he was coming out against strip. It's one thing to say that medically and aesthetically this is a better procedure in his view, but to show these, the worst possible strip accounts, the worst possible strip scars in his marketing, and the way that he was trying to market it to doctors, it really put a bad taste in people's mouth. And I would tell him, listen, dude, you're going about it the wrong way. You have to, you got to be nice to these guys. Let them know that you're here to offer something that's going to increase their revenue, that's going to make the industry a better place, that's going to help their bottom line as well. Instead of bashing everybody who's currently doing strip. That put up this huge barrier for him, this huge wall. And that's not the way to do it. Listen, I came out swinging when I started in this industry, but I'm not a doctor. He had the opportunity to really work with these guys. And because of those two major factors, one, like you mentioned, the fact that he wanted to charge what was considered back then an exorbitant amount of money to train these guys. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't share his tools, his instrumentation, or anything like that. And then coming out and basically saying that what physicians were doing in this country and elsewhere in the world was basically butchery. They're going to shut their doors on him. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, not only was he charging an exorbitant amount of money, he was insulting them.
Right.
while he was charging them.
I used to tell him, and this is the way that I felt, it doesn't matter what you think. You can think these guys are the scum of the earth. But if your bottom line is to get this procedure out to the public and to make sure, if you really want to believe in first do no harm, you have to play a little politics, at least be nice to people.
Right.
At the very least. And if you can show them that they can make more money doing your procedure, then you're helping the world. But I don't think he ever got that.
And the thing is that no one else got that either early on, because you had the pioneers, quote unquote, for the North American market.
Yeah.
Doing the exact same thing. Except, I mean, a couple of guys weren't because they're doing double duty with strip and FUE,
Right.
but you had a few guys early on that picked up the mantle of spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt about strip surgery, calling it the butchery technique and all these other wonderful descriptives. And I think that also set the stage for the epic battles online that I myself was involved in. Excuse me. And I think that overall there was a lot of resistance to the technique simply because of the direct onslaught of descriptives towards the at the time current gold standard of strip. And a lot of superlatives were being thrown around about the procedure, and
Sure.
automatically people that were adopting this early on were saying that the yield, the growth rates, transection rates were equal to strip.
Right.
Even back in 2002. And we all know that wasn't the case. And when I was online and I was fighting tooth and nail about this information, I was being called a strip monger, not just by patients, but also by other doctors.
Oh, yeah.
I was pushing the strip agenda, right? But
what's funny about that is that was so early on. There were only a handful of guys who were kind of embracing this, and I really think that they did it, in my view, some of the guys, to try to get a leg up, especially the guys that were pandering to the message forums.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing, and I think it's important that and I don't think that he's really been a big part of the history of FUE. But if you're going to write an article, no matter what some of the guys in the industry think about Bauman as far as the way he markets himself or the fact that he gets so much press, he really kind of experimented with FUE in a very quiet way before he opened up. And he was really one of the first to embrace it and say, you know what, he believed it was going to help his practice and help patients. But he wasn't going out there online and pandering to guys in the message forum saying that it's either FUE or strip and that FUE has his greater yield. He really took his time. And I don't think he gets credit for that. And I think that he should.
I think a lot of doctors don't get credit for that because a lot of them did kind of sit in the background and take kind of a wait and see attitude, maybe doing some experimentation of their own. And it's commendable to do that, to not, and it's kind of sad I'm actually having to say that, it's commendable to not be so negative. It's expected as far as I'm concerned,
right,
from a medical professional, but unfortunately it is what it is. There are far too many doctors and their patients online at the time, leading the charge of FUE and making these bold claims that we all know today were the furthest thing from the truth.
Look what happened in parts of Europe. I mean, the early adopters in Europe really, sadly, allegedly destroyed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
And they saw a niche, and they were like, we're going to jump on this early on. And there's actually a guy that runs a well-known clinic in the UK that had a bad experience at this one particular clinic. And the reason he got into the business is because he had to be repaired. And he initially went in for FUE. He had to be repaired after the procedure, and he realized there was a way to do it right. And he decided to open up his own clinic. A lot of damage done back in the day. And especially these new guys have no clue what really transpired. I think it's important that you're writing about it.
Well, the article's not going to go too much into the history of the battles and everything, but it's more of a comprehensive overview. But yeah, it will have some, I guess, touching on the history of how FUE was adopted. And what's interesting is I've caught a lot of flack over what some people have called a change of heart, right? Unfortunately, the people that are saying I have a change of heart overnight, they're not really paying attention to the way that I've actually been conducting myself. They've seen the arguments, but they've not listened to the information. They've not dissected. They've not, as I like to say, think, learn, apply. They've not applied what I've been telling them.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, I've always said that FUE has been, in theory, a great option, but the realistic facts about the procedure weren't living up to the hype at the time. My position has changed over the past 3-4 years ish, give or take, because I did start to see a steady improvement in the results that were coming out of some clinics. Some clinics got it. They understood it. They realized that you can't push it too fast, too hard, too soon. Take baby steps, do things right, and eventually it got them to the point where they're doing solid work. Now, my stance on FUE has evolved to the point where I think it's a great opportunity for the right patient in the right hands, but the basics of FUE and strip have not changed. What has changed is the efficiency with which some clinics are actually performing the procedure. But the shortcomings of FUE still exist. It's just the differences between FUE and strip are so minute now that the details that people sweat about and lose sleep about, the yield of 92% versus 94%, or the hair shaft diameter 1.6 on the scale, or 40 microns, who cares about that? It's so useless now, because the results from quality FUE doctors and clinics is now to the point where those little minute details are irrelevant. What matters is that the patients are getting great results that they're happy about, and allows them to walk down the street with their head held high, feeling better, looking better, and able to carry on their lives without anyone saying, wow, you had a horrible procedure,
right,
and you only got 85% yield. Well, shame on you.
And that's the thing. The guys that really spend too much time on the message forums, who are looking at every, minute detail of this procedure and trying to, and basically, falling into the trap of listening to and believing all of the nonsense that's being posted, especially by some of the doctors who are pandering to prospective patients about these bizarre mathematical equations and just the percentages of yield and all this stuff. Let me tell you, there's very little science behind a lot of the stuff that's being posted online. And there have been a couple of studies and a couple of papers written about graft survival with FUE, but everyone will quote, in my view, their own graft survival rate that may not necessarily be based on scientific data. And they do that because they know that this will help to market their product. And that's what people have to understand. There is a reasonable transection rate now with most guys who are doing FUE. Mm-hmm. It's almost similar to the transection rate of FUT. It's pretty close. I would say that someone who is a real practitioner of FUE, who's had 3,000 to 5,000 hours of practicing this procedure, are going to have very low transection rates. If there are technicians who are performing the extraction, a lot of these technicians, frankly, are more skilled than some of the physicians who are doing it themselves.
Absolutely.
So if they have enough practice, if they have enough experience, you're going to get low transection rates as well. If there are, if the clinic has a group of assistants who are kind of working in tandem, who are relieving other assistants, you're going to have less of a fatigue factor as well. So there's so many variables when it comes to this procedure, and people just really have to kind of understand those variables. But the truth is, in most of, especially the well-known clinics' hands, the guys that have really started to, the early adopters of this procedure, it's incredible. It's changing lives. And people have to understand that. But sadly, because of the resistance, some of these guys who have been doing strip for a very long time, that they may have incredible reputations, they are starting to play a little catch-up now. Yeah. And they don't have the hours. They don't have the manpower or the hours that some of these guys who started early have. And I think that's what's great about some of these devices that are coming on the market, because it's going to eliminate some of the human factors, the human variabilities, that are really involved in this procedure.
Well, these devices coming out, they do a couple things. On the plus side, they do cut out some of that learning curve, right? There's always going to be some sort of learning curve, because even with the machines, you got to be able to understand what the machine's doing,
Absolutely.
how, why, so on and so forth. But it takes a large part of that learning curve out of the equation, to where all the doctor or all the clinic needs to be really concerned about are the quality of the grafts that are being extracted, if they're up to a standard that they feel comfortable with, so that they can turn around, make their incision sites, and place the grafts the way that they always have,
and also the way they're being handled.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is paramount. Now, on the flip side, the danger of these machines is that it's leveling out the playing field, and it is diluting the field of hair restoration, because you yourself have been talking about how you're getting contacted by people that are not in the industry, cosmetic surgeons that do rhinoplasty or what have you,
Right?
And they're asking how to get into the industry, and they're all going for one of these machines.
It's either NeoGraft or ARTAS.
Exactly, it's one of the two, and who knows what else is going to come out. I'm sure there'll be something.
There's two more machines coming on the market.
The bottom line is, in 5 years' time, we're going to be looking at the field, the specialization in hair restoration today being turned into 1-800-DENTIST, because you'll be able to get one of these machines, and you'll be able to get these grafts out and do a procedure, and there's not going to be a whole lot to differentiate between clinics, unless clinics decide they want to get serious about this and really learn how to differentiate themselves. And ultimately, the way to do that is to be transparent,
right,
in what they do, which is one of the things that I'm going to start preaching about more often, because I think that's a sorely lacking area in the industry, is transparency, but also education. The more you educate, the more you are transparent about what you do, how you do, why, the more likely people are going to be drawn to you for the services that you offer. And that's in any field, really, but especially in our field, because when you have these procedures or these mechanisms such as ARTAS and NeoGraft that level the playing field for all the players, then you have to bring these other items to the forefront to separate yourselves.
Well, those are incredible points, and that's the truth. I think what is going to happen is, and we've spoken about this, and you just mentioned it, it's not that the playing field is being leveled. It's that the playing field is getting more broad. It's that there's more people who are going to be involved in surgical hair restoration, and a lot of novices who are getting into the field who see this as a turnkey opportunity. And that's how they're being sold by industry. As it's being sold as a turnkey
and that's what
opportunity. It is, in a sense. However, there is, even with the machines. Okay, so NeoGraft, for instance, it's a handheld device. It is really significantly user dependent. Right now, the way that's being sold, at least according to the physicians that I've spoken with, is that, okay, you get this machine in your office, we will help you market, and we'll also get you a staff to start performing surgeries for you. And basically all you have to do, if you are a novice in this, is just, as an MD, just supervise. Mm-hmm. Just be there. And that's happening a lot. So in some cases, the staff is extremely well trained. They're great at what they do. It's like any other mechanical type of a procedure. You're removing the grafts. If you're good at that, you're good at that. If you're great at recipient site creation, then you're great at that. You don't have to be a physician to be good at this. Unfortunately, in many states in this country, that's illegal.
Of course.
So there's a lot of problems there. When it comes to the ARTAS, why I'm more excited about the ARTAS, honestly, is because in the end, while there is a learning curve with the ARTAS, it is less user dependent as far as the extraction of the grafts. And the physician is much more involved because they're really creating the recipient sites. So a physician could sit there, log in, into the system, do it, set up all the parameters, and kind of watch as things, with the help of the assistants, watch as things kind of work on their own as far as the extraction of the grafts. And then during that time, basically the patient is kind of sitting up in a sense. He can create the recipient sites and kind of be a full part of the procedure. So at least at this point, the ARTAS is kind of making it a situation where the doctor is going to be involved as opposed to what the NeoGraft is doing. And I think that's important.
Absolutely.
I definitely think that there are going to be other devices, and I know that in the fact that there are going to be kind of similar, maybe not as big as the ARTAS, that are going to make the procedure easier for physicians as well. But as the industry spreads out, the guys that have been in the field for a long time are going to start to lose a little bit of their grip. And I already sense that fear. I think
it's happening.
Yeah, but I think these guys really need to be more involved. They need to be part of the cutting-edge technology and be the leaders and still continue to be the leaders instead of being resistant to it.
Well, look, I mean, when you have a status quo and it's been working, it's difficult to accept change. But you know, in this industry, as is the case with others, but in this industry, if you are not at the forefront of the next thing coming out, then you are forgotten.
You are.
You are forgotten.